Welcome to Walk the Walk, where we go beyond talking the talk. I'm Scott McClarty, head of Providence High School in Burbank, California, and in this show, we talk out of school about growing up and being a grown-up, about learning and leading for a better world. Let's get into it. Today, we're heading into the vault to revisit some of my previous conversations with our guests. These conversations are great to re-engage with because they're centered around many of the core themes we've been exploring here: leadership, trust, resilience, and how we prepare young people for the world they're stepping into. They originate from a podcast I hosted before Walk the Walk called Beyond the Bell, created in partnership with two Providence parents, acclaimed actors and comedians Matt Walsh and Jim Connor, whose creativity and generosity never fail to entertain and support us. In this episode, we're sharing part of the conversation I had with Rob Evans and Michael Thompson, two widely respected psychologists, school consultants, and authors whose work has shaped conversations around parenting, schools, leadership, and the emotional lives of young people for decades. Together, they co-authored Hopes and Fears, an exploration of the evolving relationship between schools and today's parents, a topic closely connected to the questions we continue to explore around formation, trust, communication, and supporting young people. In our conversation, we explored parenting today, rising anxiety, and the importance of building strong partnerships that support resilience. Here are a few moments from that conversation with Rob and Michael. We hope you enjoy. Everyone knows you as Rob and Michael, and it has been really a pleasure to be with both of you all day today, and we'll continue into the evening.
It's been a fun day.
It has been a fun day. And I like to start all of these conversations with our guests with a simple question. What was your high school experience like?
You want to go?
No.
I went to a wonderful small school in Dutchess County, New York, called the Millbrook School. It was then an all-boys school. It was tiny, 135 boys.
Wow.
And yeah, it was a little world, and I owned it. And there was a charismatic biology teacher who had started a zoo at the school. It remains the only school in the United States with a licensed zoo.
Wow.
The Millbrook School has the same license that the San Diego Zoo does and the Bronx Zoo does. And I took care of animals. I was well taught. It didn't have a huge enriched curriculum, but it had some really gifted teachers. It was really very good for me.
Well, thanks for sharing, Michael.
So I went for 12 years to the same school, the Germantown Friends School in Philadelphia. I loved it. It looms to this day very large in my life. I was in a class of about 60 kids. There were about 800 in the whole school, kindergarten through grade 12. We played in a league against other independent schools that were the same size, but were all boys. So they had twice as many boys in every class, and we kept losing games to them and stuff like that, which I didn't like, except for my senior year when we went undefeated and rubbed their noses in it.
And you're still rubbing their noses.
I still am. Boy, I want to tell you, that was one of the best years of my life. But actually, I had great teachers, most of whose names I still remember, and were influential in my deciding to become a teacher. You know, when you're old, you always remember the school as it was, not as it is now. But I'm still a devoted alum.
The older we all get, the more we see how times have changed, how the environment within which we try to do this thing called school has changed. And we can talk about a lot of different things. But one of the things you emphasize in Hopes and Fears is what you call the Great Disruption. Yep. Can you unpack that for us a bit?
Sure. It's a phrase that came to me because I actually read an interview in the Boston Globe with James Taylor, in which he talked about COVID as being a great interruption for him. And I thought disruption was more accurate. And I think most of us haven't fully recovered in a lot of ways. But I know things haven't fully recovered in school. To this day, every school you go to will tell you that the kids are not fully back to the way they were prior, that parents' anxieties are higher than they were. And most administrators will tell you that actually the impact on teachers is still visible as well. So to us, the Great Disruption actually continues to loom very large in the dynamic of even the best schools.
You talk quite a bit in the early half of the book about fear and specific fears that parents have and specific fears that teachers have. Would you mind telling us a little bit about how you would categorize those fears and how they actually play out in the real life?
Modern parenting is informed by what parents think they know about trauma. Because educated people read about the effects of child sexual abuse and the priest scandal in Boston and stuff like that, and lifelong harm. And in their desire to protect their children, parents began to think that their job was to protect them because their children would be easily traumatized and the effects would be lifelong. Well, if you thought something was going to happen to your child that would scar them for life, you would fight ferociously to make it not happen. But I ask audiences, I might ask the audience tonight, how many of you failed to make a varsity team, didn't become a cheerleader, didn't get the lead in the play? These things are not traumas. They cause short-term emotional distress. They're disappointments.
They're hard, sometimes painful.
And it takes you a while to recover from.
But if, I'm going to say, excuse me, I will ask them tonight, if I say to parents, think about the most important lessons you have learned in your life, the deepest and most powerful, and how you learned them. The odds are overwhelming that you learn them in a context of loss or disappointment or frustration.
Absolutely.
And what's going to distinguish every student here is not whether they encounter those, but what they do when they encounter those. And when we talk trauma, we're talking victimization, and we're underestimating resilience, right?
So the trauma's a very bad lens through which to view childhood. And we're always trying to say that the vast majority of kids are resilient.
Yep.
Some are fragile, all have fragile moments. But it's important not to treat kids as if they were fragile, because it means you're starting to giving them accommodations for lots of things. You start to do stuff for them that you shouldn't be doing for a child of that age. Once you see that a child is able to do something on developmental, stop doing it for them.
Yep.
Ask them to do it. And they will not be traumatized thereby.
Yep.
But a bad grade, a college rejection. So when I work with upper schools, I get a hand mic and I wade in. And I ask the seniors and the juniors, how many of you have a number one college in mind? And very often they'll raise their hand. I'll ask, if it's in California, it's going to be UC Berkeley, UCLA,
Stanford.
Stanford.
Yep.
And I say, so imagine for a moment that you're rejected at your first choice college. And while I'm at it, how about you're rejected at your second choice college? What's the long-term impact on your life? I've had girls start to cry even at the question. But when they settle, I say, no, what's the long-term impact on your life? Well, I'd be very upset. And I say, of course you would. And for how long? Well, maybe a couple of months, right? Maybe a couple of months. And at what time would you recover? Well, probably when I went to my third choice college and met some kids I liked, which is, of course, exactly what happens. Exactly what happens. And you get to your third choice college and find some really smart kids just like you who got rejected at some of the same places, because 95 out of 100 kids are going to be rejected from Stanford. So, but the idea that a child holds or their parents hold that if they don't get into their first choice college, that's a trauma. Or if they don't get into an elite college, that's a trauma. That's simply rubbish. It's not true, right?
Yeah.
Because there are many people in this world functioning who didn't go to an elite college.
Absolutely.
Like
a few of us probably in this room.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So are you saying partly that because of that lens of trauma in many parents' heads, how they frame childhood as protecting their children from trauma, they're actually afraid of the wrong things?
Yes, and actually you could broaden it and maybe soften it a little. The fundamental view is that children are fragile. And the research says just the opposite, as Michael's already said, that most kids are mostly resilient. And when you don't see it that way, I need everything to go right because I'm apprehensive that my child won't be able to withstand not making the team, not being a starter, not getting A's, not whatever, getting the part in the play or I don't know, whatever it is. And I'm then much more vigilant in this protective kind of way. And the risk is then that what I don't do is give my child the chance to learn both from his successes, but also screw-ups or mistakes or times when he cheats or when he, I don't know, doesn't hand the homework in or whatever. And one thing that is notably different about parenting these days is that there's much less tolerance for some of those inevitabilities and less tolerance for development, which takes its own time.
It does take its own time.
Yeah, we don't develop overnight.
No.
And we don't learn from our mistakes overnight.
Exactly. And fifth graders aren't eighth graders because they're not eighth graders yet. And eighth graders aren't 11th graders because they're not 11th graders yet. And that takes 3 years.
Plus, there's the other side of it. We were at a school in the Deep South, and we had a mother ask us, very concerned about her junior son because he wasn't getting his act together. And what could she do to help him get his act together? And I'm about to start giving some kind of answer about it. Michael says, and he starts asking the men in the room. He says, when did you get your act together? And the guy says, I don't know, junior year in college. And the next guy says, I think medical school. And there's no man in the room who got his act together in 11th grade.
Surprise, surprise.
Right? And the mom, I mean, she was really concerned. She wanted her kids just have to, you know. And what she didn't have was some capacity to think, well, gee, I want this, but really he's still 16 and he's not, he's a boy. He's going to take a little longer.
It was the late 80s, right, when the American War College coined the term volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And it's only ratcheted up every single year. And so when you think about how quickly things are changing, how uncertainty is only increasing, et cetera, what gives you hope for parents and for schools and our partnership together in the years ahead?
What settles parents down ultimately is realizing that their kids are growing and their kids are great and it's okay. And the only parents who stay in trouble are the ones who just can't enjoy parenting, who drive themselves crazy with their own perfectionism. There was an English pediatrician turned psychoanalyst, a very famous psychoanalyst named Donald W. Winnicott. And he introduced a concept on a radio show on the BBC in the 1960s. And the concept was the good enough parent. And he cast aside the idea that you could be the perfect parent, whatever the hell that might be, and said, good enough parent, good enough parent, good enough parent. And I've needed it at times to coach myself. My wife has needed it. We've both known it. But the modern parent needs to be able to say, I'm doing a good enough job, and this is a healthy kid. And isn't she wonderful? And isn't she splendid? And she turned out not to be the classical pianist that I imagined she was going to be when she first put her fingers on the ivories, right? Because most kids don't turn out to be classical pianists, even if you really emphasize practice. They just don't. So you have to let go of some things and be satisfied, not only with the child you got, but with the job you're doing, because they're closely related.
Hope isn't a forecast that things will turn out well. It's a conviction that something makes sense no matter how it turns out. And when I'm at a school where they are committed to certain kinds of values that they actually enact, it's not just like post it somewhere or in the view book. You know, you don't know what the future is going to hold, but you do have reason to be hopeful about the kids that are coming out of there. And when you meet parents who don't know and aren't always confident and are sometimes nervous and anxious, but have a couple of North Stars that they steer by, then you have more reason to be hopeful about how those kids are going to turn out no matter what. But it does require a greater respect for the unplannable parts of life.
Absolutely. Thank you to Rob and Michael for being here with us today and
a
engaging
pleasure.
in such a great conversation. And I hope our listeners find it both interesting and entertaining. All right.
Thank
That's
you
all
so
right.
much.
That was fun.
Thank you.
That was really fun.
Wasn't that great?
Yeah.
Thank you for joining me on Walk the Walk. Please support us by following, subscribing, and visiting us at providencehigh.org/walkthewalk, where you can sign up for our email list to join the conversation. Thanks again, and see you next time.